Hello, I'm Martin Park. For those that don't know me, I'm an ND and a master coach and trainer who has been working professionally in health, fitness, wellness and personal development for over 46 years. If you are someone who is interested in learning how to maximize your overall health, well-being and performance, then welcome. Today, I want to talk about three little words that can either plague us with remorse or propel us towards wisdom, and they are shoulda, coulda, woulda. We've all been there, lying awake replaying scenes from our past like a film director obsessed with alternate endings. If only I had listened to my body sooner. If only I had pursued what I was truly passionate about. If only I hadn't wasted so much time trying to impress others. If only I had started earlier, tried harder, been braver, smarter, better. Regret after regret after regret. And regret is a fascinating emotion because it lives in the space between what actually happened and what we imagine could have happened. It sits right where memory meets imagination, where the reality of the past collides with the stories we tell ourselves about how things might have gone if we had done something differently. But what if I told you that this collision, this uncomfortable wrestling match between reality and possibility, isn't actually the problem? What if I told you the real issue isn't that we have regrets, but what we choose to do with them once they arrive? Because here's what I've observed over nearly 5 decades of working with people. Regret is one of the most democratic of human experiences. It doesn't discriminate, rich or poor, young or old, cautious or reckless. We all accumulate them. The successful CEO regrets the family time sacrificed. The devoted parent regrets the dreams deferred. The risk taker regrets the chances that didn't pay off. And the careful planner regrets the opportunities that slipped by while they were still planning. You see, regret is part of the human condition itself. It's the price we pay for being conscious enough to imagine different outcomes, to recognize that our choices matter, to understand that life is finite and therefore every path chosen means countless others left unexplored. This can feel like a blessing or a curse, depending on how you choose to live with your regrets. From a negative perspective, there are essentially 2 ways people tend to handle their regret, and I've seen both responses make a mess of lives, though in completely different ways. The first response is to become imprisoned by them. These are the people who turn their regrets into permanent residence in their minds, giving them rent-free accommodation and allowing them to redecorate their entire mental landscape. They continuously rehearse their mistakes like actors preparing for a play that will never be performed. They become archaeologists of their own failures, constantly excavating old wounds to examine them under increasingly harsh light. And the cruel irony is that while they're so busy looking backward, they miss the present moment entirely, which, of course, only creates more material for future regret. It's a self-perpetuating cycle that will be almost impressive in its completeness if it wasn't so tragic. Here is an example of what regret can look like when it gets stuck on repeat. There was a guy in his early 30s who trained at my gym. After his workouts, he'd hang around reception, sipping a Gatorade and telling me about his ex. How good it was, how much they were meant for each other, but he messed it up and she left him, blah, blah, blah. I heard his same basic storyline again and again, week after week. Finally, I asked him, when did you guys break up? He looked at me and said, 6 years and 5 months ago. He was a guy whose body had clearly moved on, but emotionally, he was still standing in the wreckage of that breakup 6 years and 5 months ago. And that's the thing about regret. It doesn't care how much time has passed. If we don't confront it, process it, and eventually let it go, it settles in. It becomes a part of our identity. We end up living in the past even while life keeps moving forward. The second response is equally problematic, though it sounds more positive on the surface. These are the people who dismiss their regrets entirely, who wave them away with mantras like no regrets and everything happens for a reason. Every mistake, every misstep, all chalked up to fate and destiny, where nothing is ever truly their fault. While this mindset might seem healthier and certainly makes for better social media posts, it actually robs us of one of regret's most valuable offerings, the chance to accept, to learn, to grow, and to choose differently next time. The chance to acknowledge that some choices lead to better outcomes than others, and that some opportunities once missed don't come around again. And here's what both responses miss. Regret isn't actually about the past at all. It's about the future. When we stop treating regret as proof that we've failed or as some kind of cruel twist of fate and instead start recognizing it as information about how we want to live going forward, well, that's where transformation begins. But, and this is crucial, for a transformation of your approach to regret to be complete, it requires more than just recognition. It requires passing through what I call the 3 pillars of regret conversion. 1, acceptance. 2, learning. And 3, focused action. Let's start with acceptance, which is perhaps the most challenging part of this process. Acceptance doesn't mean you're happy about what happened or that you wouldn't change it if you could. It means you're willing to acknowledge that the past is exactly as it was and no amount of mental energy can ever alter it. When we stop spending energy fighting reality and instead accept the reality that the past is the past and there is nothing we can do to change it, then we free up that energy to shape what comes next. Acceptance is the moment you stop being a victim of your past choices and start being the architect of your future ones. And once you've achieved that acceptance, real learning becomes possible, which brings us to point 2, learning. Learning from regret isn't about beating yourself up or wallowing in self-blame. And it isn't about pretending it didn't matter or brushing it off with a shrug and a no regrets mindset. It's about being honest with yourself, really honest about what happened, why it mattered, and what you can take from it going forward. It's about becoming curious rather than judgmental. It's asking, what can this teach me, rather than, I'm an idiot, why did I do that? What were the circumstances that led to that choice? What information did I have at the time? What fears or pressures influenced my decision? What values do I hold now that weren't clear to me then? What skills or perspectives do I have today that I lacked back then? This kind of forward-facing archaeological work helps you understand not just what went wrong, but what conditions might help you do better next time. See how much cleaner this inquiry becomes when you're not simultaneously fighting the reality of what happened? This then helps you focus your attention on taking action and bringing about positive change, which brings us to the 3rd pillar, focused action. And this is where regret transforms from burden into gift. Because once you've accepted what has already occurred, and once you've learned what your regret is trying to teach you, you can begin the most important work of all, ensuring that this particular regret doesn't repeat itself. This isn't about perfection, as that's impossible, and attempting it will only create different regrets. This is about intentional improvement. It's about taking the intelligence your regret has provided and applying it systematically to your current choices. The person who regrets not maintaining friendships doesn't need to become a social butterfly overnight. They need to identify specific, sustainable ways to invest in relationships going forward. The person who regrets not pursuing their creative interests doesn't need to quit their job and become a full-time artist. They need to commit to carving out regular time for creative expression, even if it's just 30 minutes a day. The person who regrets neglecting their health doesn't need to sign up for a triathlon next month. They need to start with consistent, manageable steps like walking daily, better nutrition, and getting a good night's sleep. It doesn't need to be extreme. The focused action that emerges from processed regret is rarely dramatic. It's usually quite ordinary, quite practical, but it's also deeply intentional because it's rooted in hard-won wisdom about what matters, what works, and what doesn't based on your specific past. And here's something beautiful that happens when you approach regret this way. You begin to see your past mistakes not as evidence of your inadequacy, but as raw material for your growth. Your regrets become your teachers, your guides, your allies in creating a life more aligned with your values and capabilities. I'm not suggesting this process is easy or that it happens quickly. Some require us to develop entirely new skills or perspectives before we can extract their lessons. Some ask us to forgive ourselves for things we're not sure we deserve forgiveness for. But what I am suggesting is that your regrets, all of them, even the ones that make you wince just thinking about them, contain valuable information about who you want to become and how you want to live. The question isn't whether you'll have regrets, because if you're living a life of any ambition or authenticity, you most definitely will. The question is whether you let them teach you or torment you, whether you'll use them as stepping stones or stumbling blocks, whether you'll allow them to make you wiser or just more bitter. So perhaps it's time to have a different conversation with those shoulda, coulda, woulda voices in your head. Perhaps instead of trying to silence them or indulge them, or even pretend that they aren't there, You could listen to what they're really saying. What are they pointing toward? What do they value that wasn't expressed? What do they know now that they didn't know then? Because your regrets aren't evidence that you've lived poorly. They're evidence that you've lived at all, that you care about the impact of your choices, that you have standards for yourself and aspirations for your future. And in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, that's actually rather encouraging. It means you're not drifting through life passively, accepting whatever happens. It means you have agency, intention, the capacity to learn and grow and choose differently. Your regrets are calling you forward, not backward. They're inviting you to become the person who would make different choices, who would honor different values, who would act from a different place of wisdom and courage. That's not looking backwards with silence. That's looking forward with hope. And that might just transform everything. I thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate your company. I look forward to spending some time with you again. Bye for now.